Greetings, everybody. This is Gaia Earth Goddess. I'm back with another video, and I was coming on here to discuss the topics of BDSM versus domestic discipline. So, I wanted to talk about this because there are not a lot of us, but there are a few people who are alive today who practice a practice called domestic discipline, and it's most often confused with BDSM. And I see where the confusion comes from, so I was just making a video to clear that up. So my boyfriend and I, we practice a form of discipline called domestic discipline. So with domestic discipline, it's basically you have a dominant and you have a submissive in the relationship. Most often the dominant is going to be the male. It makes more sense for the dominant to be the male with domestic discipline versus the female, because the female is supposed to submit and follow the lead of the male anyway. So most often it's going to be the male. And what makes this dynamic, or makes this relationship dynamic different, is that with domestic discipline, the boyfriend or husband or male in the relationship is able to discipline the woman, female, quote unquote, wife, girlfriend in the relationship. The discipline can range from between a stern lecture to punishment, writing lines, standing in the corner. It can lead all the way up to spanking itself. But there's normally like a line of progression to spanking itself. And so depending on the offense is what the discipline is, and the disciplines that are carried out by the husband or boyfriend are agreed upon discipline. Like, you have to sit down with your husband or your boyfriend and they decide, okay, this is the disciplinary action for this. This is the disciplinary action for that, blah, 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 blah. And so it's an agreed upon system of discipline in a relationship. And the reason why it exists in relationships that practice domestic discipline is to teach a woman to honor her man, submission, and to follow and listen to her man. And it's something that's not widely taught today in today's society. In today's society, women are taught to be independent and to subconsciously compete with men. And so the whole thing about submission and following a man, that's nearly gone. It's not something that exists, in the Western society. So this type of relationship style reteaches a woman her place in a relationship, and it teaches her submission, and it teaches the male dominance, and it puts both people in their places within a relationship. So for example, in my life, my husband and I, my boyfriend and I, we practice domestic discipline where there are certain rules that have to be followed. And if I break a certain rule, there is a disciplinary action that happens because I did not follow that set of rules. So people in domestic discipline, they do have rules. Like, I know my rules in my relationship to follow. The boyfriend or husband sets the rules, and then they set the discipline. Okay, so in a lot of domestic discipline relationships, there is spanking, and this is where people get it crossed with BDSM, because BDSM is more like a kink. It is a thing that people do when they are intimate. It can be highly sexual. It can be highly kinky, and it does also involve spanking. And so when I tell people about domestic discipline, or I'm watching a video on YouTube about domestic discipline, or seeing people talking about it, people confuse the two. They call it, oh, this is just like BDSM. It's the same thing. And it's not, because I'm going to be very clear. BDSM is a kink. Not shaming anybody who practices BDSM. I'm not shaming anybody who practices that, but that is more so of a kink. Domestic discipline is a relationship style. It is the actual style of someone's relationship and how the man and the woman have both agreed to carry out their relationship. So yeah, it's not the same thing. I see how people can kind of fudge the lines a little bit because both do involve spanking, but one is spanking in the form of a erotic kink, and one is spanking in the form of discipline, how you would discipline a child. It's a form of discipline. And I also wanted to point out that domestic discipline is not to be confused with domestic abuse. It is not abuse. There's a difference. The major difference is that in domestic discipline, the discipline is agreed between both parties. The man and the woman, they both want to establish discipline for the woman. It's agreed upon. There's a set of rules where the rules are discussed and laid out with the woman, and she's very well aware of what those rules are, and aware of the punishments. And then there is the discipline. It's not like your husband or boyfriend is beating you. If there is spanking, and sometimes there is in domestic discipline, and most of the times there is, but if there is spanking, the spanking is like when someone would spank like a child with a belt or a switch or a paddle, and it's like a few hits on your bottom. It's not like abuse, like someone is beating you. Women who practice domestic discipline, we are not battered women. It's discipline. And the same way for people who spank their children, when you spank a child, there is a difference, and there's a line. There's a line between spanking your child and abusing your child. That there's a difference between a run-of-the-mill spanking and downright abuse. It's the same thing with domestic discipline. It's not intended to be abusive, but it is intended to enforce that discipline. So I just wanted to point out a few differences between BDSM, domestic discipline, and domestic violence, because they're not the same thing. Also, women like me who practice domestic discipline with our partners, we are not abused. We do not have daddy issues. We do not have any of those things. It's not a reaching out to find like a father figure. I had a father figure growing up. It's not any of that. It's when you're just trying to learn your place in a relationship and learn about submission, because modern women these days, we were never properly taught about submission. We weren't, because growing up in the 90s like I did, you are taught to be strong and independent. And when you come up against a man, that can be conflicting, because you're supposed to depend on men. They're supposed to provide for you. You're supposed to lean on them and depend on them. And you don't know how to submit because you've been programmed differently. So domestic discipline kind of breaks it down and teaches you how to submit and how to be submissive and follow your man and listen to his words and follow his lead. So I just wanted to come on and point those things out. And I also wanted to point out this book. This is a book that I heard about it on YouTube, and it's called Spank Your Spouse, Avoid Divorce. It's by William Baker. You can get it on Amazon. It is a book about domestic discipline. I am currently reading it. It's a pretty good read. And there are other books about domestic discipline as well. Go on Amazon and look them up. There's YouTubers who are talking about domestic discipline as well, to educate people on what it actually is. And so it's a lot of information out there about it. So people don't have to be in the dark and make assumptions about it, because it's actually a pretty beautiful thing if it's done correctly. If you have a man that's narcissistic or naturally abusive, you guys should not practice domestic discipline, because it could turn into abuse. Just know what type of man that you have. Some men are not wired to practice domestic discipline because they can take it too far. Some men are not wired to practice domestic discipline because they won't take it far enough. They don't have that dominance. So you know what kind of partner that you have, and you know what kind of person that you are. Are you ready to be submissive? Are you still in this mode of being independent and strong and, non-dependent and combative and things like that? Or what kind of person are you? But I just wanted to come on here and talk about it a little bit. That's the difference between domestic discipline, domestic violence, and BDSM. They are not intertwined. They are not related. One is a kink, one is abuse, and one is discipline. All right. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. Peace and light.